Hi, my name is Robert Shelley with Shelley Law, and my law firm assists nurse practitioners with employment contract and independent contractor agreement issues. Today I'm going to talk about some nurse practitioner contract negotiation tips. So if you are an NP and you are either newly licensed or you're switching jobs and have a new offer, what are some things you can do and maybe some areas to think about when negotiating a new contract? So first, let's just kind of talk about the process and then maybe the timing of when to negotiate. So with many jobs, they will initially send you an offer letter that kind of details the bare bones highlights of a job. So maybe your comp, any bonuses, paid time off, if there's a non-compete, maybe like really basic details of it, just kind of the highlights of an agreement. And then what they normally would want is the NP to agree to terms. And then at that point, once they sign the offer letter, then they will provide them with an employment agreement or independent contractor agreement that has, obviously much more detail about the employment relationship. A couple things to think about. One, I find it's difficult to completely agree to terms without seeing the actual employment agreement. There are times where an offer letter will look great, and then when you get into the details of the contract, it's not great. Now, once you sign an offer letter, it is not binding, unless it says it is, but I've never seen an offer letter that states this is binding. It would be ridiculous to do that. So I guess the first thing is to make sure it doesn't say that it's a binding offer letter. But if you have signed an offer letter and then get a contract and don't like the terms, you still have the ability to negotiate with the employer. Now, they may not like this since you've already agreed in the offer letter, but look, if they kind of shade the compensation one way, and then when you look in the contract, it's actually much different, well, you have every right to try to negotiate something different. So the initial matter, do attempt in the offer letter to, get the components that you feel comfortable with, but if you're not, it's still okay to negotiate after signing that offer letter. All right, so that's the first thing. Now, once you get the actual employment agreement and review it, this is the obvious time to do all of the negotiating. Once you sign the agreement, it is what it is. I do hear from some NPs where they'll say, well, the employer says we'll just deal with it after I sign the contract. Absolutely not. When you sign the contract, you're bound to the terms. And so there's almost no reason for the employer to make major concessions or changes in a contract after someone has signed it. So you never want to sign a contract and just expect to make changes after you've signed it. They may say that, but in reality, that's just not going to happen. Now, the major terms for most NPs are as follows. One, compensation. So how are you paid? Is it a base salary? Is it some kind of net collections? Is it RVUs? Do you get a bonus? These are the things you need to look into. If you're in a specialty, acute care, women's health, there's obviously a number of different nurse practitioner specializations. You need to look and try to find some data on what is the industry standard in your specialty, and then use that when negotiating with the employer. There is data available, so I would just Google around and find what your specialty is and see if you can find some salary information nationally that can help you negotiate with the employer. All right, so that's compensation. Bonuses, so do you get a signing bonus? Do you get relocation assistance? Do you get productivity bonuses? All of these things need to be negotiated in advance, and then the timing of those payments needs to be clear in the contract. You can obviously negotiate the amount of your signing bonus or how much they pay if you have to move. So these are things you need to look at as well. Who pays for malpractice insurance? If you have a claims made policy, do you have to pay for tail insurance? Absolutely look at that. It's not prohibitively expensive, malpractice insurance for an NP. Usually it's somewhere between $2,000 to $3,000 a year, and so if you had to pay tail, it'd be twice that. But it's one thing to look into, and certainly something we would negotiate regularly. The restrictive covenants, so the things that you can't do after the contract ends. So non-solicitation agreement, non-compete, non-disparagement, confidentiality. For most people, the non-solicit and the non-compete are the most important components. So, and more specifically, the non-compete. So you need to identify how long does it last, and then what is the geographic limitation, and then what can't I do? And so some contracts, let's just say you're an FNP, you got some options. You could do urgent care, you could be a hospitalist, potentially depending upon the state that you're in. There's you could be in family practice, obviously. If you're, let's just say you're working in urgent care, well, you want to limit what you can't do after the contract ends to what you're doing for that employer. So, meaning if you're working in urgent care, it needs to say you can't work as an urgent care nurse practitioner within 5 miles of your primary practice location, versus you can't work as a nurse practitioner, if that makes sense. You want to keep your options open as much as possible. Now, every state has kind of a different standard as far as what's considered a reasonable non-compete, so I'm not going to throw out numbers here, because one, it can be vastly different than how your state interprets it, and two, you could be in one, there's a handful of states where they're completely unenforceable. And so I would just look into whether you're in one of those states, and then kind of what's a normal restrictive covenant non-compete where you are. And then lastly, the benefits. So health, vision, dental, retirement, disability. Are they going to pay for your continuing education? How much are they going to pay? Your dues and fees, so your AAMP and licensing board with the nursing board and professional associations and societies. These are all things you can negotiate in advance as well. So you need to be prepared with numbers if you're going to go in and ask for more. If you have a track record of being extremely productive, then bring those numbers. I had this many net collections, in my last practice, or I was able to see, 30 patients a day regularly when I was in the practice. These are the things that the practices care about. Just to say, well, I want 10,000 more because I think that's fair, that's great, but it's much more persuasive to say, I'd like 10,000 more because I'm 20% more productive than the average nurse practitioner, and then here's exactly what my productivity numbers were in my last job, and that type of thing. As a business owner myself, I love data, and just hearing someone say I'm a hard worker really is meaningless to me. It's okay, well, how many hours did you bill, or how many clients did you have at one time, that type of thing. Those are the important things. So the more data, the better. So those are a few tips if you're going to negotiate a nurse practitioner employment agreement or independent contractor agreement. If you have any questions about either of those things, feel free to contact my law firm at the phone number listed below in the description, or you can reach us through our website listed below as well. So anyway, I appreciate you watching the video. Thanks.